What are stealthy Yelan's biggest pros and cons? That's what I'm here to tell you today. My name is Juice and let's get into it. Dude, I think Yelan needs no introduction for the majority of players. The number one thing about Yelan is that she is literally, to this very day, and has been ever since her release, a top 5 meta character, for both low, mid, and high investment players alike. It doesn't even matter how you jig around your personal top 5, Yelan will more than likely end up there somehow. She has managed to stick with the times insanely well, and no matter how much the metagame of Genshin Impact has shifted over the years, ever since her inception into the game, Yelan has quite literally always been relevant, and she continuously gains new use cases with freaking brilliant characters, left, right, and center. I mean, dude, she recently gained a use case with Arlecchino, the Knave, you know? Only one of the best DPSs in Genshin Impact. Yelan's constantly synergizing with the most high-profile units in the meta, and oftentimes slots into very current and relevant teams. You can justify her as a flex slot in so many places because that's just how good she is. Like, seriously, one of Yelan's biggest pros is that you know you won't be wasting your Primogems because you're pulling for an extremely powerful unit that obviously has a highly regarded reputation surrounding her. I mean, shoot, the hype for this unit is high. How does Yelan end up being so valuable, I hear you ask? Well, for starters, her A4's ramping damage bonus is a very nice additional treat, which she really didn't have to have in order to be great, but this expands the amount of things that Yelan offers you whenever you put her into a team. Let's think critically here, folks. What does Yelan provide a Genshin team? A. Crazy sub DPS. B. Hydro application for days. C. Her ramping damage bonus. D. Excellent mobility around the arena. D feels especially underrated in my opinion, especially in abysses like the current one, or in 12-1-1 it's honestly really nice how you can Yelan skill to get to the other half of the arena where the enemies have spawned faster, the kind of quality of life you can only truly appreciate once you've tried it out for yourself. It's almost like this character was built to be future-proof from the very beginning. I mean, hey, Xingqiu's a fantastic 4-star, so whenever you decide to crank him up into a 5-star and trade his defense for heavy offense, you end up with an absolute behemoth of a meta unit. Like, seriously, Yelan unironically aged like fine wine. Or fine tea, I guess, since she owns a tea house. Does she look like a tea drinker to you, honestly? Part of what's kept Yelan relevant in the meta for so long is her stunning flexibility. She can work in almost every team in the game that can feasibly use or weave in normal attacks in order to trigger her burst procs. Yelan truly is a spy because she seriously knows how to infiltrate nearly all of the teams in this game. From having extremely versatile and powerful team cores like Double Hydro, to being a good pick for normal attacking DPSs like Arlecchino and Wanderer, there are a very few amount of scenarios where Yelan cannot work over can. There is a big chance that Yelan will be able to support whoever your main DPS is, especially since she works with the majority of main DPS characters in this game. Not all, but a majority, which is still highly impressive in my opinion. This all leads to Yelan having an excellent long-term shelf life. I mean, dude, do I even have to sit here and tell you about how well Yelan has aged? The woman released way back in 2.7. Lo and behold, now we're all the way in freaking 4.8 right before Notland's release, and even after over 2 whole years of this character being available, she is still easily one of the best pulls that you could make for literally any kind of account ever. If you're in extreme late game, Yelan will still find a huge amount of value on your account, most likely replacing your Xingqiu for good if you already have a Furina. If you're a new player, Yelan is easily one of the best first 5-star characters that you could ever pull for. You know how humans have staple foods like bread and milk and stuff? Well, if we had staple Genshin 5 stars, Yelan would absolutely be one. She works with nearly every freaking team under the sun, so no matter what you have to work with, you will be able to make your teams like 10 times better with Yelan around. I also think this next point is pretty niche, since I assume not a lot of extremely fresh players watch these kind of videos. But since Yelan uses Lioyan materials, her materials aren't locked behind a super high AR rank, so you can consistently build your Yelan throughout your entire initial playthrough of the game. Yelan is best described as an evergreen character. She is only ever going to acquire more teams as time passes, and she will only continue to stand the test of time as that happens. I can't make a video about Yelan without mentioning how good her sub DPS is. A large benefit when adding Yelan to any sort of team is her fantastic and highly formidable sub DPS output, no matter what the team is. And since she's HP scaling, her burst damage isn't Bennett dependent or buffer dependent whatsoever, since the only HP buffer in the game right now is quite literally herself at C4. So most Hydro characters tend to have their damage output balanced around the fact that they have no real dedicated buffer yet, which makes Yelan's damage output all the more reliable for every team that you slot her into. Not to mention how the numbers are simply just high, and you'll come to appreciate the difference she makes to your team's overall DPS. For comparison, here's Masanori. Say hi to the lad. Here's a Mist-Splitter Xingqiu, and here's an Aqua Simulacra Yelan. Who will kill him faster? Place your bets now down below and let's see. I mean, is anybody surprised? Not trying to dog on Xingqiu here, he has many other excellent qualities, but I'm just trying to prove how much better Yelan's damage is over Xingqiu. If you pull for a Yelan, you can absolutely expect great numbers. What I will say is that during said showcase, Yelan was buffing herself with her own ramping damage bonus too, so she did still technically have a buff of sorts on her side. Another neat thing is that since Furina is so highly contested in the current meta, and all your teams want her, Yelan is a great either replacement or double Hydro partner for her. Now, yes, Yelan is giving you nowhere near as much damage bonus as Furina is. Yelan's ramping buff is backloaded, which means you won't get the full buff up front, so we can realistically assume that you have about 25% damage bonus from it on average, whereas a C0 Furina provides you 40 to 50% on average, depending on the team. Even with that being said, wherever you need a Hydro applicator, Yelan will work. It's a common misconception that her Hydro isn't enough for Hu Tao to vape, but if you apply N2C combos, that actually isn't the case. Have a look for yourself, Masanori's getting vaped left, right, and center. So on the Hydro front, Yelan is all good. The buffing front, while it is only roughly half of a C0 Furina's buffing on average, it's still very appreciated. Pre-Furina, it was kind of nuts, and Yelan simply adds a big helping of DPS to any team you stick her in. Navia, Chiori, Yelan, Bennett is a good example of a team where you typically use Furina, but Yelan is a very comfortable replacement. One of Yelan's greatest qualities, in my opinion, is that she's got some seriously wild vertical investment. Like, her constellations and weapon are absurdly good. Aqua Simulacra? At this stage, I think it's fair for me to call it the best 5-star bow in the whole game. Yes, even over Polar Star. Direct damage increase, it's really good in Vaporini, which is a very strong team, go try it for yourself before saying anything, and works on every DPS bow character in the game. It's quite literally ridiculous how good Aqua is as a weapon on the whole. I will glaze it until the end of time. And on Yelan herself, oh boy. As long as you're able to keep her ER high enough with her artifacts, her damage goes balls off the walls with this thing. It's already good without it, but holy guacamole with a side of cheese, I don't even like cheese, Yelan gets a massive jump up from this thing. I'm selling Aqua so hard because its flexibility is formidable beyond belief. You can even choose to run her more supportively with Elegy, and my god this works like a charm, keeping her own burst up while buffing your entire team. Try it out in Vape Arlecchino or Hu Tao, that's where I personally enjoy using Elegy Yelan the most. But oh no, we are not done here yet. We have established the insanity of Yelan's weapon, but her constellations. Yelan's entire con lineup is good, like there is no bad con. I even think C1 is good for both the overworld comfort and the tactic of moving across the abyss field faster, plus reducing Yelan's own ER requirements. C2 just makes her go holy damage, C4 gifts us the only HP buffer in the game, and C6? Man. C6 Yelan isn't the best C6 anymore, it's been power crept by C6 Furina, and has been power crept by most of the really insane Fontaine C6s in general, like C6 Nervalette and Arlecchino. But dude, it's a C6 for starters, so who cares? Second of all, it's still better than like 90% of C6s. It is absolutely still in the top 10. Fantastic C6 which turns her into a vape DPS. And she has amazing early constellations, especially her C2 which kicks up her damage by a solid amount. Then we arrive at the con section, as in the negatives when pulling for Yelan. Dude, I'm gonna be totally honest, there's not that many. Just see these as smaller considerations to make when pulling for this unit, because trust me, the pros heavily outweigh the cons. Yelan is single target, meaning that her burst damage only hits one enemy at a time, so even if your DPS is AoE, her Hydra application will just stick to one enemy. Abyss is a lot more two-target and boss-centric nowadays, so this shouldn't be a huge deal, but it is something worth considering for heavy AoE scenarios or situations where you might not have enough Hydra application. Personally, I think this is Yelan's biggest con. You need to normal attack in order to trigger Yelan's burst, or more specifically, use normal attack inputs. The reason why I specify is because Raiden's burst form attacks are technically considered as burst damage, but the input in order to execute the rest of her DPS is through normal attack inputs. AKA, you make her do normals, therefore Yelan can trigger her burst with her. But if you're playing Plunge Vape, for example, then Yelan has to awkwardly weave in her Hydra application in between Pyro plunges, which is nowhere near as fluid as Furina continuing to apply Hydra while your Pyro DPS is airborne, and this applies to any plunge team in general. Yelan feels very uncomfortable to use with teams like Xiao and Xianyun plunging Navia. Or how if you're charged attacking like Nervalette, you have to normal attack afterwards to weave in Yelan procs, which once again is just extremely awkward to do, so she doesn't feel comfy to use in every scenario, so consider who your main DPSs are, what are all your favorite teams, and do they use a lot of normal attack inputs or normal attacks? Or could they weave in Yelan procs comfortably? This easily makes for the most important consideration when it comes to pulling for Yelan or not. This is something that I mentioned earlier in the video. Yelan's buff is backloaded, which for the uninitiated means that it takes the course of a whole rotation or buff duration for the full effect to stack up. Because Yelan's ramping damage bonus maxes out at 50%, you are more likely to have roughly 25% on average, and it takes some time until you're able to take full advantage of Yelan's buff. Yelan is still meta. Still really, really meta. If you're a new player, old player, fossil player, and you don't have Yelan, then get her. Yelan is the definition of not just a good character, but a great character. Her kit has been remarkable ever since her release, and I picked her up during her initial banner when everybody was saying that she'd end up being mid because we already have Xingqiu. And all I can say is that I'm glad my faith paid off, because holy guacamole, Yelan is truly a unit. Remember to follow my Discord and follow my Twitter. Both of those links will be down below in the pinned comment and description. My Ko-Fi will also be in both of those places if you're interested in supporting me. Otherwise, feel free to check out my channel memberships, which I've opened up recently as of posting. You can gain some access to cool emotes. More perks and tiers coming soon. I also don't mention this much, but I stream on Twitch. Check me out at twitch.tv/JuiceChanWhitey if you want to catch me live sometimes playing Genshin, Wuthering Waves, Honkai Star Rail, and much more other things. Hopefully this video was able to tell you Yelan's biggest pros and cons. This has been Juice, signing out, and Yelan's biggest con is that she doesn't like sweets. Dude, who doesn't like a slice of cake every now and then?